Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning and salam sejahtera to everyone that has tuned in for one of the, I think, most important topic that we're going to talk about today on a fine Wednesday afternoon. This is, you've come to a panel, fireside chat. I have two very distinguished gentlemen with me today. And the topic that we're going to talk about is pivoting to thrive, creating value from data. So I have to admit that this whole week in MDAC, we just launched, or we are going through our AI and data week. So this has come at an opportune time for us to talk about how we can create the value from data. So I would like to just introduce my two panel speakers, and I think they don't need any introduction, to be honest, because, you know, when you Google them up, you'll be surprised to see some of the things that they have achieved in the past, but yet looking extremely young. In the case of Paul, Shayanta, no offense to you. No, I think Shayanta is my longtime colleague, and I've always been so gobsmacked with the things that Shayanta has brought to Axiata. And with Paul, very quickly, Paul, I'm just going to introduce you to the audience. Paul, I'm looking at your profile here, right? You're the first technical staff in APAC from 2008. You found a sales engineering team in APAC. You lead the SE team for a triple-digit revenue growth across Fortune 500s and government organization. You played an evangelist role. I like to think myself as an evangelist as well, to security executive, cybersecurity, trust advisor, public speaker. You're here today with us, and also professional cybersecurity trainer for special government agency and enterprise. I'm sure I've got a lot to learn from you today. I'm looking forward. I myself sit at a government agency, as you know, MDAC. And you're also, this is really, really interesting. You're an instructor for Interpol's Cyber Command workshops, teaching threat crime investigation team in police for 18 plus countries. So I'm not going to mess with you. That's what I'm trying to say, Paul. And then, of course, we have Shayanta. Shayanta, I had the honor of working with Shayanta last 2 years. I mean, we worked together for about 3 years, but Axiata, and I've seen how Axiata Digital Services kind of grow from strength to strength. And now Shayanta is the CEO of Boost, the Fintech holding company of Axiata Digital Services. First joined in 2013. Served as the Senior General Manager of Finance and Strategy for Dialog Digital Services. So Shayanta is bringing a lot of international experience to Malaysia. Subsequently, he assumed the role of Chief Executive Officer of Wow.ik, the e-commerce subsidiary of Dialog Axiata PLC, leading the company to market leadership status. So prior to Axiata, Shayanta spent over 13 years in the financial services industry, in investment banking, financial advisory, and portfolio management. He holds an MBA from Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania, and is a chartered management accountant and a CFA charter holder. So with all this that I'm reading out to you, so the audience would probably understand why I am absolutely nervous at the moment, because I'm in the room with the titans of the industry, and we got a lot to learn about fintech. Before I go on any further, just very quickly about me. I'm MDAC's Chief Digital Business Officer. The short abbreviation of that is CDBO. And where I am in MDAC, I am leading the digital adoption ecosystem in 4 areas: e-commerce, business digital adoption, data ecosystem development, very dear to my heart, and digital infrastructure services, cybersecurity, as well as data cloud. So I do also help MDAC looking at external innovations opportunities to expand commercial strategies and build corporate business and innovations for MDAC. So with that out of the way, now I am going to start with my first question. And this first question is probably something that I'm going to throw to the both of you. And there's not many questions that we have today, but really poignant questions that I hope to hear from your views, Paul, and also your views, Shayanta. So the first one, before we go any further, maybe you want to give an overview of your organization's product and services, as well as the type of data that you deal with, whether it's customer data, transactional data, or performance data. So without further ado, maybe I can start with Shayanta. Over to you, Shayanta.
Okay, thank you, Aiza, and thanks. Good to be here today, and thanks to MDEC for inviting me. Aiza, always good to catch up with you, I think, after 2 years. I'm sorry you think that I haven't got younger, but I'll try and do my best the next time we meet. But yeah, so I'm the CEO of Boost. Boost, a lot of people, I guess, on this group will be familiar with. E-wallet brand is quite well known here, but Boost stands for a lot more than just our e-wallet business. Recently, we went through a consolidation exercise where we consolidated all our fintech businesses under Boost. Aside from our e-wallet business, we have a merchant solutioning business, which deals with not just providing payment services to merchants, but providing a whole host of other services, helping them to go online. We actually work with MDEC a lot on that front. We have an alternate credit lending business, which is actually about 3.5 years old. Originally started off as under the brand name of Aspirasi. Now it's called Boost Credit. That is where a lot of our AI and really the use of data and advanced analytics started in that company, and we have to talk a little bit about that. We have a fledgling insurtech business. We have a cross-border enterprise solution business, which was called Apigate previously. Now it's called Boost Connect. So we really are a full spectrum player in fintech in Malaysia. We also operate in adjacent markets as well. So we are present in Indonesia as well, offering similar services with a slightly nuanced model. And we also operate in Bangladesh as well. So that's a quick update on who we are. So obviously, when you look at the breadth of those services, there's a lot of data that we deal with. So it involves a lot of data on individual customers. It involves data on micro enterprises. It involves data on enterprise customers. It involves a lot of other data that we collect in the process, right? And probably as we get into specific use cases, I'll be happy to talk a little bit about that and maybe provide 1 or 2 deep dive examples. Yeah, so Aiza, back over to you.
Thank you so much for that very comprehensive walkabout in terms of what you're doing. Very, very interesting stuff at Boost Holdings. Paul, please enlighten us, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about your Interpol stint. I'm very curious about that.
Yes, certainly. Okay, first of all, about Spunk. Actually, this is my company. We actually a US company. We listed on NASDAQ. So we provide the solution, the software solutions, and also cloud solution to company interesting on doing the analyzing on the what we call the machine data. So for example, like in US, like the Fortune 100, 99 of them is already using Spunk, doing different type of the data analytics. And when we're talking about data analytics, certainly you may have some focus. You may be like myself, I'm the security guy. I'm working on the cybersecurity. I have some customer working on the IT operation, cloud management, all different things. So one of the very major use cases on cybersecurity in the last 10 years is there was a lot of the different attack. So it's no longer just each company or enterprise, you have your own security team. To a lot of the countries, you also have the dedicated government officer, maybe the police team, maybe the army team. They're also focusing on this kind of the national level attack, okay? So that is the reason why we are focusing on providing not just tools and platforms, but also some of, for example, the knowledge to train up our guys, our customer, how can you fight against the hackers and also the cyber attacks.
Okay, so interesting stuff that you're doing, right, guys? So maybe, you know, the whole thing about today's conversation is creating value from data. With Shayanta, I mean, I'm going to stay with Paul for a while, Shayanta, and don't worry, Shayanta, you're always looking good at any age, okay? No worries. So I'm going to stay with Paul for a while. Paul, you know, interestingly, I looked at your profile and you've got government agency as your client or customers, right? Maybe for everybody's tuning in, I'm pretty sure there are some from the government agencies as well, or government ministries, yeah? If you can just walk us through a typical process of how you go about unlocking the true value of your data, then using those data to relearn the processes, simplify the journey, and improve the products and services. And I'm going to give you just one hint here, right? One hint. If ever Malaysia is going to go full-blown, full throttle into digitalizing government services, what would this question I've asked you and the answers that you're going to give me will be able to help kind of skew their thought process on the prioritization?
This is a great question. Okay. Yeah. So first of all, let me define what is data. So in the past, when we talk about the data, you may considering about from your system, you store what is the user transaction, what the user has done. But besides the data you normally see in your internal report, there are just 20% of the whole data in your data center or in your cloud. There are another 80% of the data we talked about as what we call the dark data. Now, dark data means no one touch it, you're storing it, but you untap it, you don't know what is the value of it, okay? So as a guy fighting against the hacker, besides we are working on understanding what is the user behavior, what is the transaction, we're also interested to know if there is something looks normal, but maybe this is a hacker activities or malware activities. How can we define and detect it? This is actually the ultimate goal, what we call about the threat hunting. We are not waiting for the alert. We proactively try to find out the root cause of it, okay? So one of the example is you may heard about last year, just like in Japan, there was 2 crypto trading company being hijacked. They lost a lot of the money because the crypto or this kind of thing being stolen, okay? And also on the government side, you heard about US government, they have a Kaseya when somewhere talking about a supply chain attack. Some of the infrastructure is actually implanted some kind of the malware. So those data normally, if you are not focusing on a dedicated team on this kind of the threat hunting, you will lose the visibility of it. So back to your questions, to have the awareness of it, you need 2 kind of things. The first thing is you should have a data strategist, make sure all this kind of normal data, user data, and also dark data, you have white ways to protect it and store it. With the data, it is easy then for your security teams to have the special checking. You may manually checking based on the skill set, or you may apply AI and machine learning technologies to help you to do the auto profiling, finding the anomalies, okay? So that is a common thing right now in a lot of the countries when they are rolling out like the Fintech, because when the Fintech is doing is no longer human interaction, most of the time you are system to system. You also rely on something to have this kind of the detection in machine speed.
Wow. Okay. Well, I think there is a bit of that's just mind-boggling. I'm just listening intently to you because you know the conversation around data, especially in this part of the world, has always yielded 2 things like don't do it, let's not do it. This is government's data or consumers' data. And then the second is don't do it. Don't do it. So it's always don't do it. I'm just joking around here. So there's really no let's do it and this is how we do it. So thank you for letting us know how things can go about fact checking dark data. So I've never really looked at it from that perspective, and quite frankly, because I'm not a data scientist, right? So thank you, Paul, for that. Now, Sheyantha, just leveraging on what Paul is saying, right? I mean, at Boost Holdings, we know this. And it is very widely talked in the market as well, that you are going into the underserved and unserved segments, right? And then I'm pretty sure there lies a problem also with data that's available to you. But however, going in there, 2 parts of this question, how can you in Boost Holding help these segments with data analytics? And second, it's a bit provocative, what do you intend to do with the data that you collect from these segments? I mean, if the second question is a bit uncomfortable, don't worry, you can give us context.
No, I think it's fine, Aiza, thanks for the question. I think, and going back to what you asked, Paul, I think how do you capture value through data, right? I think our entire model is based primarily, if you take a fintech in this part of the world, the primary thesis is, or the opportunity to capture, opportunity to serve is really serving the underserved. So that is fundamental. And 2 key pillars of making that work. One is being able to scale digitally, right? So getting, so where the cost to serve and the cost to scale makes sense. The second one is the use of alternative data, because the data is very thin. when it comes to this segment of customers. And typically they don't have formal sets of data, right? So they are not what we call thick file clients, if we look at it from a credit lens, or they are thin file clients, right? So data plays a strong role in actually helping us capture value in that entire business model, right? So I think that's the first point. I think I can share specific examples to your second point. I think the first thing we did, and we started this journey almost 3-4 years ago, and a lot of it started off in our lending business, but now it's kind of cut across, right? Is really how you collect and organize your data, right? How you set up your data pipelines, etc. So and Paul touched a little bit about this, right? We started by, if you like, building our own CDP, collecting our first party data, looking at third party sources of data, making sure that we have the right data governance structure, right? And when we were building kind of our DMP, we wanted to make sure that, both in terms of governance, both in terms of the use of data, are we getting the right data engineering, data strategies, as Paul put it, to look at how we use data. We wanted to make sure that we got that right. I think that was the first step, right? I think in terms of the application that we've been able to do most successfully, it was really, I think, our lending business, if you think about it. So we started our lending business back in 2018, and the real thesis was to serve customers where there weren't formal data sets. Your income documentation was poor. And we used all sorts of alternative data like transaction data, profile data, location data, etc., both from, like I said, first party, third party sources to score these customers and provide them financing in the first instance. And we've gone beyond financing now, but I'm just taking financing as an example, right? And the fundamental proposition was we always wanted to make it a compelling proposition for the customer, right? So if you think about the journey that we started with, it was a 3-minute journey for somebody who had never taken a loan before to apply for a loan on our platform. Completely pre-scored based on data. You apply in 3 minutes and you get your money in 24 hours. And the 24 hours is just because we go through the banking system, right? Yeah. And that's a little bit of how we were able to serve the underserved, because simplicity is important when you're servicing that segment, right? So you can't, that's where digital platforms and data both help, right? You can't have them waiting. You can't have an offline, online manual process. You need to make it simple. You need to make it elegant. You need to make it robust. And I think we cracked the code on that very early on, and that helped us, especially with the underserved segment. And the paradox here is you're using digital means to target people who are not very digitally literate. So that's something that you always have to keep in mind. And that, I think that starting point, we got it right, and that helped to scale our lending business. I mean, I can disclose we've done about 500 million ringgit worth of loans over the last 18-19 months here in Malaysia, despite the pandemic, right? And really to small businesses. And it's all based primarily on our digital AI platforms. So I think that's a very real use case that we've been able to scale quite well. Now, the process of actually helping people who are not very digitally savvy, underserved, is a continuous process, right? So there's a lot of data now that we are using now in the UI UX journey, right? So maybe behavioral data, where we try and refine the online journeys that we have. We do it for 2 purposes. One is fraud detection. One is actually to make the journey more seamless, right? That's one use of data. We are looking to see, still experimental right now, but how we can use bots, right? So both call assisted bots and even online, right? To see how we can help people more seamlessly get on the journey, especially people who are not very digitally savvy. So these are all things we are doing, and it's a learning process. To be honest, it's a continuous iteration, and you have to have that mindset of continuously being able to iterate, especially when you're dealing with underserved segments.
Yeah, well, guess what? You've actually answered my next question, because my next question is about how does data assist in bridging the non-digital native gap? So you've already answered that very eloquently. So with that, Paul, I'm going to go back to you, because Sheyantha kind of already gave us a flavor of the fintech of the future, right? I mean, everybody seemed to know, everybody seemed to have an opinion about fintech. It's like, I know fintech, I'm doing fintech, but here we are with Sheyantha, who's actually doing it with micro lending, cashless, and all the things around underserved and unserved segment. Now, Paul, this is a question for you that it might be helping Sheyantha and also some of the aspiring digital banking operators that might be tuning in. So we know fintech is a new area, but most over-talked, if I can put it that way, right? there's really no mature guidelines yet or best practices when it comes to cybersecurity. Now, you're the leading authority to speak about cybersecurity today. Now, if you can just share with me, what are some of the trends that you have seen when it comes to the rise of fintech? Just skew it on fintech and just fintech, and the greater need to protect data through enhanced cybersecurity. You can give us your best initiative or projects that you might want to share with us the experience.
Sure. This is actually very hot topics in this moment in a lot of countries. So for example, we did help some kind of the virtual bank in Hong Kong, in Japan, Korea, etc. They have the same journey, okay? Actually, Stratas share a very nice thing is, in the past, when we do the traditional business using IT, you may have different type of data and they all sit in silo. Okay, different team. If I'm the network guy, I'm more concerned about the network information. I'm a developer, I'm concerned about my developer, debug code, etc. But once upon is if you have the data shortages, you put it all together, same set of data depending on the user role. If I'm the fraud detection team, I have a different view about the transactions. If I'm a businessman, certainly I'm interested about what is the top line or this kind of information, right? So back to the thing is, when we talk about fintech, it's no longer something like you use the traditional way, like you use a data center, you have the development cycle, all that thing. A lot of them you may heard about in terms like people using agile programming, they use DevOps. They are talking about, I need to feedback to the end customer very, very fast. I may have one release per day, okay? So that kind of the thing, if you're thinking about the old mindset or traditional mindset of security is, I try to block the bad guy. I set a guideline, you set up once and you think everything's okay. Yeah. But in real life, in the DevOps world, it is so agile, it is dynamic. So this is no longer you are using the same process. So this is the reason why in a lot of countries, they are actually working on something called red tech. It's a regulatory technologies. It's talking about how can you do the automation of the compliance, make sure the baseline is safe, you have the trust level to the end customer. But not just on the compliance side, this is another area is, fintech is new area, hacker also raising a lot of the interest of this area. Yeah. So this is also the reason why in a lot of the countries, the monetary authority, etc., they also have the guideline that you may need someone from the management level. So that's why they will enforce you to have someone called CISO, incorporate with every security incident. But you also need someone down to the earth to actually chasing the hacker, detecting all this kind of thing. So that's the reason why, for example, like in Hong Kong and Singapore, so when we're doing about the fintech, it's no longer just you need a CISO, not just a figurehead. You also have the dedicated engineer doing what we call the threat hunting. And the result of the threat hunting is no longer just a report you submit after the incident. To a lot of the authority, they want to be proactive. So that means touch base. If my fintech company, I got an incident, when you submit the report, you also need to submit what we call the indicator of compromise or the threat finding about where's the hacker come from, what's the IP addresses, how is he break in the system. And this kind of the information sharing becomes a big trend now. Is a lot of the industry, especially in the banking side, you like to learn not only from the internal side, you also learn from your neighbors, from your friends. If you see another bank have the same attack, you now have the P-alert, and then you can prevent whether there is the same thing happening to you. So information sharing is a big thing right now in different industries, especially in the finance side. So as I said, in different countries, they even already have the regulation talking about how you make sure all these kind of the independent parties, they will submit the information like this.
You know, I would love to see the day, and Shayanta would laugh if I say this, I would love to see the day when we've got all the banks being friends and have coffee together, you know, coffee and cake together, and maybe just do pigtails on each other's hair. But in reality, I love what you said just now, Paul. We should make sure that, you know, if you're being attacked, let's look at it from a collective impact point of view, rather than you go like, aha, he's getting attacked, I'm not going to do anything about it because I'm fine. Because chances are when the hackers, they start to attack, is not really at one point. One point maybe is more commercially driven, but there will be other areas that they're looking for. It might be an attack on the nation itself. So we've got to band together and really, fight this or battle this together. So thank you for answering that question in that way. Certainly, where I sit at the government agency, we do have our national agency for data. They're doing fantastic stuff over there. We've got our infrastructure guys as well. And where I am, I drive the digital economy with my colleagues. So there are a lot of collaboration going on. But what I think is important, and Shayanta is doing this quite well, is to have private-public partnership a little bit more stronger, because there's a lot of things that we can learn from our industry guys, our industry friends. And I think there's a lot of our industry friends can also leverage on the government, because the government of Malaysia these days, and also other governments in other parts of the world, we are no longer traditional, right? I mean, that perception needs to change. We are now understanding all the latest trends and actually doing something about it. And I'm not propagating, the government is doing very good, very well. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying that there are realization and it's already in place, and we are hiring the right people. We are talking to the right people like yourself and Shayanta to actually do something about it in making sure that Malaysia or ASEAN move towards becoming a digitalized nation, right? Or digitalized region. So on that note, I'm going to go to questions, because there are good questions coming our way now, right? Now, I'm not going to pick this up in any order, but just because we were talking about just now in terms of underserved and unserved, and then Paul, you touched about cybersecurity in fintech. Now, one of these questions that I thought was very interesting is anonymous. I wish you identify yourself. The concentration of data amongst big techs is a cause of concern. How should governments address this? Unfortunately, as a moderator, I don't have to answer that question. So feel free to answer that question, either Paul or Shayanta.
Shayanta first.
Yeah, let me have a go. So look, I'm a big advocate for democratizing data, right? I don't think at Boost we quite qualify. I don't know what they mean by big tech. I don't think we quite qualify yet into the big tech space, right? But I think even if you take what we do, right, we try and not just rely on the data sources that we capture, right? And that's fundamental to how we actually run our business. I mean, we've been advocates, even if you take our business model on open loop systems as opposed to closed loop systems. I think you can't run an open loop system if you don't have data from parties and other sources, right? So again, just to take an example, right, of what our lending business is, again, sorry if I'm going back to the same kind of business, but I think that's the best way to demystify some of this to the audience. Today, we do lend to a lot of customers who are on Boost, a lot of merchants who are on Boost, but we also lend to other partners, right? So people, let's say other large corporates who service small businesses, right? And we do that through a partnership where they share data with us, right, in exchange for co-creating products and putting it out to the market, right? So I think I am completely for ways in which we can exchange data. Obviously, data privacy, pdpa concerns, all of that has to be addressed, and there are ways of doing that. I mean, there are very, very practical ways of doing that, and we've been doing that. But I think that's another point where you can really capture value. So I am all for actually a lot of openness when it comes to data sharing. It's something that we do now more through partnership models. I mean, either you alluded to the fact that we partner not just corporates, government agencies, etc. And I think that's been the fact that we've been open to that has actually been to our advantage. And it's the same philosophy when it comes to data, right? We believe in open loop partnerships. We believe in the ability to the power in augmenting data and getting enhanced data profiles on people, and being able to then co-create products and services based on that, right? So that's fundamentally a principle we ride on. Yeah.
Lovely. So it's partnership model that actually working, and I wouldn't say propagating, because then you're going to get in trouble, but I think you're open to the whole entire democratization of data. Is that right? That's what you're saying, yeah? Yeah.
Correct. Correct. Yes.
Yeah. And Paul, segue into the question. This is a very, I think this question is made for you, to be honest. So the anonymous, again, I just wish you guys can introduce themselves, yourself, but it's okay. How do fintechs manage data, especially for cross-border, taking into account different countries that may have different data regulations? I think this question is made for you, Paul.
Yes, certainly. This is actually the FAQ. So as I said, most of our clients working on fintech, they no longer using the traditional data center approach. A lot of them is actually working using the cloud. They like the elastic, how to scale up all this in the cloud. So first of all, cloud is just infrastructure, okay? So the protection is still done by you. No matter which cloud provider you're using, they don't do much for you on the data security. So that back to the question is, do you have the common way or standard to protect your own data? So based on that one, actually, if talking about the traditional banking finance side, this is pretty obvious. You have different way on protecting from the data access, from the authorization to the data transfer, etc. This is actually same concept, okay? But the difficulty is, in the past, you know exactly where's the location on the data. You know which hard disk, which server. In the cloud, it's just dynamic, okay? So the point is, if you can have the data strategies that you don't need to consolidate all the thing in the same point, you can still running distributed in multiple countries. But the point is, if you have the visibility in real time, understanding about different type of the data, what is happening, you have the same methodology on assessing whether this is a violation, this is okay or not, then this is actually the cloud security strategies to you, okay? This is hard to some customers because if you have no experience about cloud, you may land on some tools you never used before. But remember, data is data, okay? If we are talking about user ID is user ID, fraud detection is the same way on doing fraud detection. It's just talking about whether you have accessibility to that data, okay? So that is another reason why a lot of our customers, when they have that kind of the data journey, they actually also put extra consideration, not only in the cloud area, they also consider about the mobile side, the end user side. How can you also have the visibility on that area?
Lovely. And you know what, Paul? The next question, I think this question is made for Shayanta. Funny enough, these questions are really, really coming and it's fun watching it, reading it out. And Shayanta, I'm so happy that I don't have to answer this question. So one question for you. Again, from Anonymous.
Anonymous again.
Yeah, anonymous, a lot of anonymous, but we've got one person that decided to put his name. So I'm going to congratulate him on that. What do you think about shared client onboarding data through utility eKYC?
Shared client onboarding data through utility eKYC.
Yeah, and utilities bills. Yeah.
I think, yeah. So again, let me center on the eKYC component. Yeah. That's the starting point. So utility, using utility data is one source of it, right? I think being in financial services, the thresholds for eKYC are quite high in the regulated sector, right? So that's one. I think eKYC is one area where the use of proxy sources gets difficult because it's very highly regulated. So utility can be a proxy data source, right? But I think, so for instance, if you take Bank Negara, for instance, they've come up with the eKYC standard for banks, but I think a lot of fintechs also kind of moving to those standards, because when it comes to things like eKYC, I think if we are operating in regulated sectors, we need to be, it's a basic checkbox you have to do for your business, right? So for me, when it comes to eKYC, it's not an area where I am very comfortable using proxy data, to be honest, right? I think there are practical frameworks now using biometrics, facial recognition, that are quite advanced, right? And I think that's technology has come to a stage where, the false positive rates on a lot of the eKYC platforms that are used now are coming down. So I think that's one area where I think I'm not in favor of using a lot of proxy data, right? I think using first-party data is quite important, because you're onboarding your client. It's important to know your client, right? And then thereafter, the use of proxy data after that, I think it's fine.
Okay, so this question I'm gonna get the both of you to answer, because I think the person presenting this question or asking this question would really want to tap onto your knowledge, right? So it goes like this, anonymous still. For an organization that is just embarking on data footprint, what is key? Okay, theories aside, what really works based on your rich experiences? So I think this is a practical question, practical answer that they want.
Okay, maybe let me start first.
Sure.
Okay, so if my understanding of the question correctly is, when you talk about a footprint, is more like the data coverage, what kind of the data you should put in considerations. So in the technical point of view, so first of all, you should have different layers of the data together. On the system side, certainly this is something monitoring what is happening on the application side, system side, transaction side. You also have the corresponding information, like no matter you use KYC or whatever profile data, you also need to understand about the background, the profile on each client, whether it's a real guy, bad guy, history, etc. Right? But there's another very important thing is, how can you have the predictions? You may leveraging some kind of what we call about the intelligence. So you may consume intelligence from maybe third party, tell you about this is a bad credit history, all this kind of intelligence. But intelligence also including something by yourself. Remember I said the reason why you want to have a threat hunting team or internal risk management team is you want to derive from your own data to prepare that kind of the internal intelligence. No matter you use it internally or you share with other friends is another thing. But the point is, this kind of the thing, you already spend so much time, effort to understanding what is the root cause of these maybe fraud transactions or maybe the hacking transactions. Why don't you have a proper way on keeping it and share it and use it as one of the point? So that is actually coming to the traditional data center and also to the DevOps world. And that is becoming a mandatory requirement because, for example, in US government, they even have a standard called zero trust architecture. So what is zero trust architecture is talking about, you no longer trust a user if you just log in successfully. In the past, if a user log in successfully, you will allow him to do whatever he thinks, right? But now with the zero trust architecture is we don't trust the user anymore. We do the extra step of verification on what procedure he's doing. Whether he submit a transaction, he loading some data or downloading some data, each step you have an extra verification. So for the audience, if you're interested to know what is it, you can just Google it. So zero trust architecture is actually something very hot in this moment. Or if you like to do some bedtime reading, you can read a documentation talking about the US standard called NIST 800-207. Okay, they tell you about the details, what is the layer of the data and how you combine them together to have that kind of the real-time verifications.
All right, thank you so much. Shayanta, could I actually move to another question, because I think Paul kind of put everything into perspective for this particular question. And this is from Dave Chu, or maybe I'll go into something that specifically has our name in it. Let me think. Okay, I'll ask this question first. What do you guys think of our future, or how do you guys think of our future of open banking? That's the question. Maybe it requires just a short answer. Yeah, open banking from Dave Chu. Thank you, Dave, for asking that question.
Very interesting question, and thanks for asking that question. I could talk for 2 hours on this topic, but I'll try and give you maybe a 10-second version of this. Right? I'm a fan of open banking, right? And I think that the challenge for a lot of banks is because a lot of banks are stuck with legacy systems, monolithic systems, and the transition from them to move from where they are to an open banking system is a journey. Now, having said that, a lot of Malaysian banks have started doing that. I think, and I think people may know that, Boost along with RHB is an applicant for the digital banking license. And one of the models, it's a lot easier, let's say if you're a challenger bank, right, where you build your platform from scratch, to have an open banking architecture, because basically a lot of the new digital banking platforms are cloud hosted, are modular in design, allow you to scale on API platforms, and you are able to actually link to a lot of fintechs. When you thought about traditional open banking, when it came into work about 10, 15 years ago, it was how banks work. And Wells Fargo in the US was a good example of this when they started it, right? But it was about linking your banking to traditional partnerships. Right now on API platforms, if you have a new age banking architecture, you can very quickly connect to a lot of fintechs. And I am actually an advocate that while digital banking, challenger banking is a hot topic, I think the model that works, if you look at the various models out there, is the ecosystem-driven model, the partner-based model. And for you to do that, you have to be able to work on an open banking model, which basically means you open up all your banking products and services through APIs for your partners to use and co-create products with you, right, in a very simple way. So I'm an advocate, and I think it's a lot easier for challenger banks to do that than traditional banks, but there are a lot of traditional banks that are making quite a bit of headway, not just in Malaysia, but regionally as well.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for that answer. And we are coming to our last question. So I think, Paul, this is probably you and I can answer this, but like I've said, I'm a moderator, so I don't really have to answer anything, but this is a very good question. What, in your opinion, are the barriers to government services adopting cloud for better digital transformation, analytics, and security? And Paul, feel free to share your anecdotal or your experience with other governments as well, so we can learn from you.
Okay, so first of all, this is it is a historical questions, because actually a lot of the governments are already doing this now. Okay, so for example, I'm based in Singapore. I can tell you Singapore already have the initiative that they allow or promote all the government agency running their public services in free public cloud. Okay, so it's not just one cloud. Actually, they allow you to run on different cloud. You have a selection. So that is very obvious because you rely more and more on the system to system. You don't want to no longer have the human interaction. You improve the usability and also the performance. So that is the same thing. We see the same history and journey happening now in Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, Australia, all different cities. Okay, so the consideration is when you're doing all this kind of thing system to system, you're no longer just talking about whether this is a user after you have a correct user ID. So back to the thing I shared a little bit about is you need to put extra consideration, no matter it's the security side or the business side. How can you do the step-by-step verification whenever the user, he may come from different locations, he may using different process or assessing different level of the sensitive of the data. So that kind of the real-time verification is the core part. How can still maintain the trust model? This is the same thing like if you now go to the bank no longer have a security guy, they have a lot of the bunker, that sort of the thing. The bank in this moment, just like the open area, you go down to sit down, and then whenever you do the transactions, the staff will ask you the extra things to verification on each transaction. Thinking about this from banking to government is the same thing. Okay, if you talk about general information gathering, that's not the thing, you can do it immediately. But when you start to do some transaction based, you have extra verification to make sure you are the guys really trustworthy. So back to the question about the government kind of initiative, as I said, this is already a lot of government already run that for time, a lot of time. It's just the point is whether you have that kind, it's not just an application, it's an ecosystem. Whether you have the surroundings and supporting all this together.
Thank you. Guys, you know what, there's a lot of questions. So I think we can, apologies to the the organizers, because I think, when people post questions, they genuinely want an answer. So maybe very quickly, there's a question from Faiz and there's another question from Din, but we'll just prioritize Faiz now. The question is this, right? But if the panelists can actually answer very quickly. Vast data resides with traditional financial services providers, but PDPA is often being cited as one of the hindrances for ecosystem collaboration. So focusing on pdpa as a hindrance for ecosystem collaboration. In a less than 1 minute for the both of you, your comments. What do you think?
So PDPA is actually forcing you to have the consideration of the protection of the data level, no longer just parameter level or server or network. So this is actually, I would think, a positive way on promoting the digital security and also digital transformations.
Ecosystem collaboration is, PDPA is not an hindrance. What about you, Shayanta? You deal with a lot of consumer data.
I don't think it is. I think, but we need to be careful. I think the concern is right. I think, again, it can be a long answer, but two things that we need to focus on, right? I think one is customer consent, and data sharing has to be non-PII, right? I think you need to stick to those two principles as a base. Now, if you stick to those two principles, plus a lot of other stuff, there are ways to partner, right? I think customer consent is absolutely paramount. And it's not fine print consent, it's actually real customer consent. And that's the way the world is moving. And the second one is data has to be non-PII.
I love what you guys are saying, because to me, to be honest, the narrative must be right. I think all of this is really about the narrative first. To clear off certain concerns, we have not been doing enough, and I take fault with that. I mean, I will first put my hand up and saying that the narrative hasn't been built strong enough or frequent enough to really tell people that, you know, there's really nothing for you to worry about. I think that's something that we need to do more. Last question. Do you see disruptors to banking coming from crypto space, especially with companies like Ripple that seeks to disrupt traditional banking remittance services? Again, 1 minute, guys. I'm so sorry for this. I just want everybody, all the questions to be answered. Yeah.
My short answer is probably not crypto, but with the use of blockchain technology, it is already disrupting it, right? So I would say crypto probably, I mean, the debate, the jury is still out there on that one, but blockchain is already disrupting traditional remittance services. So the use of blockchain technology for sure, yeah.
For sure, yeah. What about you, Paul?
Well, to me, I'm not an expert on the finance side, but to me, crypto is a new way, because you no longer need to protect just one place. This is talking also about user to user directly, right? So that is the reason why this is also the refresh on the security. How can you also do no longer on the infrastructure level, but also on the transaction level? How can you make sure each other thing is okay?
Right. Thank you so much. There is a question, but I think that question, I would take it. What is your take on the recent CTOS secrets breach? Unfortunately, for the person asking the question, I think we answered your previous question. For this, I would say that at the moment, we can't really comment on that for the secrets and CTOS breach, but do keep on the lookout in terms of the narratives that's been built around that and some explanation that's coming forth. So guys, we have actually come to a bit of, I've just got a what do you call that? A message saying that we have time until 11:30. However, I think we can go through. I mean, if there are questions, more questions coming through, please, shoot your questions to Paul and Shayanta. But while we wait for some of the questions to come through, I do have 1 or 2 questions of my own as well. Okay, so now there's one question that I thought I'll ask. It's a very generic question, right? Shayanta, you've worked with many places, right? You work across countries. And Paul, you've also worked across countries. I mean, we were in the chat room and you talked about how you were based in Hong Kong, and now I think you're in Singapore, right? And the stuff that you're doing. Can you guys please share with me and also the rest that's listening, what are some insights that you have come across, data skewed, that completely blew your mind? Yeah, so maybe I can go with Shayanta. You first.
Okay, so I don't know anything has completely blown my mind, but that's also because I'm a very difficult guy to surprise, right? But maybe a couple of things, right? I think I have been surprised at the extent, especially in markets we serve like Malaysia and Indonesia, at the rate of digital adoption by segments that are traditionally non-digitally literate, right? So the data the data showed us that this could be done based on some behavioral characteristics, etc., we had a natural tendency to be skeptical because it's not something you think would happen, right? You think it'll be a long journey. I think that's one that surprised me, and the rate of adoption is much more than I expected. I think the same thing for our merchant business in Malaysia, as we started onboarding merchants, small businesses online, and the rate of digital adoption, the rate of adoption for payment services was far more than I thought. Recently, we've come out with almost, if you like, a self-service onboarding portal for our merchants. Again, these are, we deal with very small merchants, right? So you're talking about, nasi kandar outlets, very small merchants, and we are seeing that the adoption being far more than we thought it would. So I think that's encouraging, and that's been insightful and surprising. Another example I would take is maybe on the lending side, what we've seen, right? So we've seen actually our thin file. So without getting too technical, our lending predictability models were telling us that there are certain thin file clients, no data, very small income levels that were actually good credit quality. Now we tend to be skeptical, right? We found that over maybe a 12-month cycle that they tend to be a bit more creditworthy than thick file clients, certain segments, not all, right? So again, I guess it's important that we don't second guess data. I think that's the underlying, that's the message I have, and sometimes be led by the data, because very often, the data doesn't lie. Your own biases and your own preconceptions often color your judgment, right? So I think if you're really serious about data, be serious actually about letting the data guide you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Shayanta. What about you, Paul? Anything that blew your mind?
Yes. So actually, I did work with some banking customer for 20 years or 20 plus years. In the past, you can thinking about they have the same mindset is if I have no matter transaction data, I make sure I have 3 copies, stay in some places, put it in a safe, something like that. But now you can see that people actually changing their mind. They actually regarding it's not just a data, it's becoming a goal. They do the data mining on this. They do prediction, what the end user trying to do. They do the real-time analysis, what is the product is popular or what is the thing. So you see that they actually turn data into actions. And that is actually being more rapid, especially when I see our customers such as in the virtual banking side. They no longer waiting a release in every 3 months, 4 months. They do the release every day. Yeah. So one of the case I am very surprised is actually I see one of our customer, they have a new service or applications just go out to the market within days. Okay, this is actually cannot imagine in the past in the banking side. Okay, and that is certain. This is the reason why they have a very good competitive edge, because they are more user friendly. The customer actually like to use it. So it's no longer like a price war in the past. It's no longer talking about I have 1% more discount or this kind of thing. It's just actually fighting for the user experience, also fighting whether you have the intelligence of the end user and how can you do it as actionable intelligence.
Thank you. You know what, guys, I thought I'm about to end this, but the questions are still coming in. So I think we're just going to have the last 2 questions before we stop this altogether. Obviously, there are things that are being said, very good comments coming forth. Now, I'm going to divide the question between you and Paul and Shayanta, okay? The first one would be for you, Paul. What's your view on people being forced to give up data because if they don't, they'll be left out of online participation? And Shayanta, I'll ask you the second question.
Okay, can you repeat the question again?
Sure. What's your view on people being forced to give up data because if they don't, they'll be left out of online participation?
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe
I'm not really agree that you give up data. It's just one data for multiple usage. I was thinking that way. Okay. Yeah. So thinking about if just like in the movie Iron Man, you have some advisor to teach you what is the next step. I will think in the positive way like that. So I'm happy to have that advisor, no matter on the finance part, on the IT side, on the security side. So I am actually thinking that as a benefit because I'm not losing the data. I'm actually let someone to help me to have a better approach on handling this. Eventually, this is certainly still a gap. Some gentleman or end user, they cannot adopt the new technology. This is always the debate between digital transformation and legacy systems. But I will always thinking about is we are actually building very hard to make sure all this kind of thing to be more user-friendly. We have the smart people like Sarava who build the new apps, which is user-friendly to the end user, right? So eventually, I think this is whenever we have that kind of the balance, user will be happy to accept this kind of the thing.
See, guys, coming from a cybersecurity expert there, nothing to worry about. So the second one, Shayanta, I mean, at least you give some comfort. And talk about comfort. The question here for you, Shayanta, is this. Data often comes as the cost of convenience. So how much are we comfortable to give away for that? It's a bit of an open question, Shayanta, but I thought it's a very poignant question. Can you help?
It's a very topical question, right? I think how much of data should I give away? So two things, right? I think one is we are moving, especially with the standards like GDPR are coming through. We are moving to an environment where your data now cannot be taken without your consent. It's going to be implemented. It's not 100%, right? So the first point to realize is the choice is yours, right? I think that's a good step in the positive direction, right? Now, the question is how much. It's related a bit to the question you asked, Paul, right? How much of my data am I comfortable? What's the trade-off? Give more data and get more convenience, right? The more data I give, the more offers I get that are more relevant to me, right? I think actually that is, it's the provider. It depends on your individual context, right? And it also depends on the services that you want. I think I would personally be careful in the data that I give out on mass scale platforms, right? As an example, right? But I would be very open to giving out data if I know that I'm getting benefits from it, right? Now, if you take an example, if I take my own example, right? People who do transactions or businesses that do transactions with us know that we may be using some of that data to be able to give them loans to help them grow their business, right? Because we may not be able to get traditional sources of data for them, right? So that's a decision that is made with a conscious awareness because I'm giving some data and I'm trading it for a benefit that I may get, right? So I think it really depends on the platform or service that you want, and the trade-offs are different based on that. Yeah.
Thank you, Shayanta. Thank you, Paul. I've been moderating hundreds of webinars, right? And I have to say that this is the one webinar that I really don't want to rush you guys. And thankfully, we were given extra 15 minutes to have a chat with everybody. So that's really, really good. In the last minute, guys, you have given so much for all of us to learn. And then, basically I sit at the government now, right? Shayanta, you know this, I'm on the other side. But there's always this craving and always looking back into the industry and what the industry can do better. And you represent the voice of industry in terms of data and unlocking the value from data very, very, very well today. So thank you so much for doing that. And Paul, the insights that you've given us and at least the confidence level, and I hope this permeates through not just this webinar and the participants that listening, Malaysia in time, that these are the things that you're sharing are giving us hope and confidence that there's really nothing to worry about. I mean, it's not nothing, but are we worrying about things to the point of being catatonic and not advancing in terms of our transformation? And I think you decipher that very, very well. So before I closed off, I would really like to close off with the both of you giving your anecdotes. So before I do that, I don't want to have the last say, right? It's usually the case where moderators say goodbye. So I'm going to say my goodbye now, and I'm going to leave it to the both of you to at least in 1 minute or 30 seconds each to share what you hope for the future of data, not just for Malaysia, Paul, for the global as well. Shayanta, you're also someone not entirely just in one country, you've been in multiple countries. So to everyone's listening, thank you so much for participating. The questions are fantastic. I hope I've done justice to you, and everything that's bad probably came from me and everything that's good came from God. So thank you so much. I sign off for today, but I leave Paul and Shayanta to give all of you their anecdotes and their last words. So goodbye, everybody. Stay safe. Shayanta or Paul, you first.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, as I said, The data, the importance of data is certainly so obvious. So this is very important that you should have a data strategies. And that data strategy should be driving not only on the working level, but from the management level. And based on that one, you can turn the data into intelligence. Then you can take actions backed by that kind of the analytics. And certainly this one will give you the positive feedback on this.
So my view, and for anybody who is running a digital company or comes from the tech side or the industry side, my advice is this. I think if you take, data, AI, analytics is all buzzwords, right? But in my view, this is going to become hygiene, or it's not going to be a source of competitive advantage for any company. It is today, but in 3 to 4 years, it's going to be hygiene for any company. All right, it's almost going to be as hygiene as having your tech platform. So I think it is an investment that any tech company, and you don't need to be a big tech company to do that, needs to start thinking about now. Right, because if you don't, it may sound a little cliche, but I do think you will be left behind because it is becoming so pervasive.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.